All right. Today, we're going to start what we should have at the beginning of this week, but we're very much off schedule at this point. Today, we're starting a unit about civil transgressions in a digital medium. So basically what we're talking about are, well, I won't say it's not happening right now. Virtual assets have been the subject of numerous lawsuits over the years. The history of the internet is full of them. Even from the very beginning with the first assets, the under contest in a civil court, things like trademark and domain names and so on. And I suppose we'll spend some time talking about those. But as I mentioned earlier this week, we're going to be talking about video games because those virtual environments right now are really the main ones that most people are interacting with, and the most immersive of those. And the new frontier for civil transgressions as well, and not in a sense of, can getting griefed in PUBG lead to a lawsuit? The answer is it probably could, but but more along the lines of the current capitalist environment of the video game industry, giving rise to numerous lawsuits, particularly when it comes to things like monetizing gaming experiences through microtransactions and loot boxes and cosmetics and so on. And even though that's where it starts, that's going to be the ingress here for most people. That's just the main platform these days. It won't be for very long. And to show you what the future looks like according to Mark Zuckerberg, let's talk about the metaverse. See what he has to say about it.
Who we are and what we hope to build. I am proud to announce, starting today, our company is now better. Our mission remains the same, still about bringing people together. So the brands, they're not changing. And we are still the company that designs technology around you.
All right, so what prototype Android Mark Zuckerberg here is saying is definitely a misnomer. What was the last big technology that Facebook came up with? Anybody? That's the correct answer. They fucking haven't. That's the correct answer. I think that they bought it. I don't think that they created it. Mark Zuckerberg is responsible for creating a social media platform, which in and of its time was not revolutionary in terms of any of the technology which it was using. It was revolutionary only in terms of the implementation of existing technologies. So this idea that Meta is somehow in a position to leverage their vast proprietary technical assets to move humanity into the futuristic Star Trek world that Mark envisions here is already not a great start. You know, if you've been in the class long enough, you know that it's you can't just say a thing. And even though he does just say a thing, obviously they're having a problem right now with getting people on board. So let's see how Mark plans on getting people on board.
Imagine, put on your glasses or headset and you're instantly in your home space. There's parts of your physical home recreated virtually. It has things that are only possible virtually, and it has an incredibly inspiring view of whatever you find most beautiful.
Hey, are you coming?
Yeah, just gotta find something to wear.
So speaking of games, obviously, if you consider yourself a gamer, or if you follow gaming news or anything like that, you're familiar with the bait and switch tactics that gaming companies will do in order to assure pre-sales or generate interest in their games. like what they might pass off as gameplay footage, but it's not actually gameplay footage. They call it a horizontal slice. So what that means in the parlance is essentially that what they do is they take the game or part of the game, they reduce its complexity as much as they possibly can to like a single area. That way they can offer more assets and a smoother gaming experience and so on, which isn't exactly reflective of the end product, but is at least reflective of best case conditions. What is the gaming environment absolutely like if there is no other considerations or overhead? It's a horizontal slice. However, if you are familiar with that, you should know this isn't that. Nothing you've seen so far is the metaverse. This is not a horizontal slice of the metaverse or anything like that. This is so far complete cartoonery. It's not reflective at all of what the metaverse is actually like. But keep it in mind, because you will actually get a little bit of a peek of what the metaverse is really like later on. Hold on, I'll tip the artist so that they extend it. So this must be the proprietary technology that Mark is talking about, right? The playing cards and VR and the AR art, all of that must be the proprietary Facebook, I'm sorry, Meta technology, right? No, no, it's not. Just as Facebook was a collection of existing technologies, not even necessarily in a novel way, because of course Facebook has been the subject of several lawsuits based upon the novelty of it as a very idea. No, so far just leveraging things that already exist and have already existed. Good, good. Privacy and security from day one. You get to decide who you interact with and when. Notice he didn't say anything about privacy and security when it comes to Meta. Meta will still know you're in a private bubble. Meta will still know you're online and who you're interacting with. He's not saying anything about that part of it.
Need a physical TV, it'll just be a $1 hologram from high school kid halfway across the world. And you'll be able to take your items and project them into the physical world as holograms and augmented reality too. One part of this is Horizon Home, which is our early vision for a home space in the metaverse. Horizon Home is the first thing that you'll see when you put on your Quest headset. Today, there are already a bunch of options to choose from, and in the future, anyone will be able to create one. We've just called it home until now because it's been missing something very important: people. Soon, we're going to be introducing a social version of home, where you can invite your friends to join you as avatars.
That's a little bit more like what Meta actually looks like currently, although this is obviously still dramatized, but notice the avatars, no legs, very cartoonish appearance. Just if you've not seen it, just pointing it out. The whole robot playing cards thing, absolute fiction. This is more like what you see. Of course, now there's legs.
There is a lot, which is you can build work. Build some interesting experiences, from bringing your games together, to throwing surprise parties, VR that family and friends around the world can join. But last year, I was working with the system, and while I miss seeing the people I work with, I think remote work is here to stay for a lot of you. So we're going to need better tools to work together. Let's take a look at what working in the metaverse will be. Imagine if you could be at the office without the commute. we still have access, presence, shared physical space, with chance interactions that make your day all accessible from anywhere. Now imagine that you have your perfect work setup and you can actually do more than you could in your regular life. On top of all that, you can keep wearing your favorite sweatpants.
Work starts right now. Republicans taking over key states, giving a new to march. And it means democracy as we know. You have to stop transparency. You did it in 2021. You can stop it. Or look, I think one great deal.
And as we focus more on work, and frankly, as we've heard your feedback more broadly, we're working on making it so you can log in requests with an account other than your personal Facebook. We're starting to test support for work accounts soon, and we're working on making a broader shift here within the next. I know this is a big deal for a lot of people. Not everyone wants their social media profile linked to all these other experiences, and I get that, especially as the metaverse expands. And I'll share more about that later. But I'm genuinely optimistic about work in the metaverse. We know from the last couple of years that a lot of people can effectively work from anywhere. But hybrid is going to be a lot more complex.
Not dealing with the ads anymore.
It's time for us to adopt a new company.
Right, but you've got to be shaking. There's a first point of himself. And you can't.
For your feet or work. We're working on making it so you can log into Plus with an account other than your personal. We're starting to test support for work accounts soon, and we're working on making a broader shift here within the next. I know this is a big deal for a lot of people. Not everyone wants their social media from linked to all these other experiences, and I get that, especially as the metaverse expands. I'll share more about it later. But I'm genuinely optimistic about work in the metaverse. We know from the last couple of years that a lot of people can effectively work from anywhere. But hybrid is going to be a lot more complex when some people are together and others are still remote. So giving everyone the tools to be present, no matter where they are, whether it's a hologram sitting next to you in a physical meeting or in a display taking place in the metaverse, it's going to be a game changer.
All right, so you also keep this in mind while you're watching all of this. Not everything he says is completely stupid. Sometimes he makes some very decent points, and it sounds like there's promise to the idea. But keep in mind, every single time an idea like that crops up, he's referencing something that isn't currently possible. Like, it would be just awesome if we had hybrid workspaces where you could stay at home and people who are in the office could be in the office and you could sit next to them as a hologram. Do we currently have the ability to project ourselves as a hologram? No, we don't. I mean, I guess technically we do.
More time doing things that will be good for the environment. We plan to continue to have choice rather than forcing them to use requests or find apps to reach customers. And we'll aim to offer developer and creator services with low fees in as many cases as possible, so we can maximize the overall creator economy, while recognizing that to keep investing in this future, we'll need to keep some fees higher for some period to make sure that we don't lose too much money on this program overall. After all, while a growing number of developers are already profitable, we expect to invest many billions of dollars for years to come before the metaverse reaches scale.
So the devil is definitely in the details when it comes to finances, but I mean, what he didn't say there is quite a lot. Funny that he wrapped it all up by saying that they were willing to invest billions of dollars for years. It doesn't seem like the investors are willing to continue to invest billions of dollars a year in unprofitable ventures, but I guess we'll see.
us too. Realistic presence is the key to truly connected in the metaverse. And the presence platform's capabilities are what's going to deliver on that promise. Things like environmental understanding, content placement, persistence, voice interaction, standardized hand interaction. In fact, let's start with hand. I mean, the human hand is an engineering marvel. Moving hands into VR is no easy. Products, design, research, but we continue to improve that product, find new ways to navigate with gestured interactive VR. So today, we're introducing interaction.
All right, I'm not going to let it slide. I was going to let it slide. I'm not going to. They seem to be aware of the fact that this technology is extremely human-centric. They seem to be aware of the fact that this is something that they want to do for people to improve people's lives. But it's very telling how they completely miss the point when they refer to human hands as an engineering marvel. I mean, maybe in the case of prototype Android, Mark Zuckerberg, that's the case. I don't know. But. Now, she said next year. By the way.
And you'll be at a higher end price spectrum too. Our plan here is to keep building out this product line to release our most advanced technology before we can hit the price points that we target with Quest. All right, so let's talk about some of the new advances here.
Yeah, sure. There's a ton of new tech going into Cambria. For example, your avatar will be able to make natural eye contact and reflect your facial expressions in real time. This way, people you're interacting with will have a real sense of how you're actually feeling. It does mean building more sensors into a form factor that's comfortable to wear for a while. And because we want VR to be for everyone, we also want to make sure avatars represent a diverse set of human facial features and skin tones, as well as paying attention to things like glasses and mirrors that may get in the way of some of the sensors.
So that's going to be a big step forward for social presence. And I'm really glad that we're focused on making it inclusive from the start. Now, what about unlocking more mixed reality experiences? I mean, imagine working at your virtual desk with multiple screens while seeing your real desk so clearly that you can pick up a pen and write notes without taking your headset off. Or you're doing a workout with a virtual instructor in your living room.
It's going to be so cool. We're already seeing the potential of these kinds of experiences today as people are building for Astro APIs. But with Cambria, we'll be taking this to the next level with high resolution, color, mixed reality casters. We essentially combine an array of sensors with reconstruction algorithms to represent your physical world in a headset with a sense of depth and perspective.
But the ultimate goal here is.
So what it sounds like, and from what I've read about Cambria, the plan is rather than doing what current VR headsets like the Vive Cosmos and others currently do, which is essentially to have outward-facing cameras that will simply display the external surroundings on the internal monitors. They're planning on having outward-facing cameras that will instead digitize surroundings to create in-universe versions of them or something like that. That's what it seems like to me.
Through augmented reality. And we've been working on that too. And today, I want to show you an experience that we've been working on for Project Azure, which is the code name for our first full augmented reality glasses. Here, you'll see you're chatting with friends on WhatsApp and planning everything. You can select a game, and then as you walk over your kitchen, you can easily just put your game onto the table and you're off. That's the kind of experience that augmented reality will unlock.
All right, that's probably enough. Just for a moment, however, spare a thought for all the heavy lifting the two-word simulation footage is doing here in the corner. Now, the problem with this, again, isn't the idea. It all sounds great, right? Wonderful future with all of us exercising in our living rooms with these giant VR headsets on. I see absolutely no problem with this. Well, the issue that Meta is having is that they have designed a technology for people that people don't really seem to be interested in. And they're designing it for future people, because future people will get it. And in the meantime, current people are kind of being expected to pay for it. As he mentioned, their business model, vague as it is essentially that they will develop new technology, which Meta has never previously been known for. New technology, well, in some cases, completely novel. In some cases, it seems like it's more like they're reinventing the wheel. And in other cases, it seems like they're just kind of taking bits and pieces from what other people are already doing that kind of work. And they're trying to roll it all up into one platform. The difference is that the Quest is fairly popular, and other VR headsets are also fairly popular, but not in terms of the market's not there, right? VR headsets are more popular than they've ever been, but the number of gamers that are using them is relatively low. It's still all console PC. Why is that? Well, it's already got a high price point. The Quest is probably the closest to an accessible unit that you can possibly get, and I think that a Quest 2 is like $300 or something like that. And even then, what you end up with is pretty anemic. I actually have a Vive Cosmos and a Quest 2 that I play around with. Vive Cosmos is $600 or $700 or so. The Quest significantly less than that. And in terms of performance, Quest is absolutely anemic. There's very little that you can do with it practically. But another reason why, consoles are expensive too, right? So why not make that investment if you're really interested in VR gaming? Well, the reason is because none of them, except for the Quest 2, are standalone units. And the Quest 2, if you've got that kind of money, you're usually better off spending it somewhere else. Because point number 2, there's just not that many really good titles for it. There's a couple of really good ones out there, but you have to have the market first. You need to have the content. Nobody signs up for Netflix because maybe in a couple of years, they'll have a couple movies worth watching. It's not how it works. Conversely, it actually works in the opposite direction too. You can't just adjust the expectations of a market midstream. As we talked about earlier this week, old Elon has himself a little problem on his hands with Twitter because the only thing that makes Twitter novel or profitable or really worth anything at all is the user base. Users are leaving. And so he announced, well, no, sorry, he didn't announce. The plan was leaked, and then he responded to it. That one of the ways that he's planning on making Twitter profitable is by charging a monthly subscription service for verification. You all hear about this? Yeah. Stephen King, yeah, as a matter of fact. A very good point from horror author Stephen King. What makes Twitter profitable is the user base. Part of the reason users go to Twitter is because they can get messages directly from the celebrities that they enjoy and follow. So having somebody verified on the site adds to its value. People are using Twitter because, well, maybe not necessarily in Stephen King's case, but in many celebrities' cases, because they're on there. And so Stephen King, if you didn't see it, basically said $20 a month. Are you crazy? You ought to be paying me to be using this shitty site. Well, he didn't say it like that, but it was implied. And to which Elon directly replied, we have to be profitable somehow. We got to pay the bills. How about $8 a month? That $10 price point, it seems to be really popular for a lot of different services. But you can't adjust expectations like that. You can't change the market midstream. Being verified is something that Twitter started prior to Elon many, many years ago, specifically to combat problems with accounts simply being created that were either parody accounts or were masquerading as an actual celebrity. The blue check mark provided assurance to all other users that the tweets really were indeed sent by that person. So it was a way of not just fighting misinformation, but to verify to everyone else on the site that indeed these important users were here. So now suddenly charging a subscription service for it, a subscription fee for it rather, it's not going to incentivize people to do it, although some people probably will. Although I do wonder if all it takes to get verified is maybe a cursory inspection and a $20 a month subscription service. I'd be willing to drop $100 a month or so on some choice accounts. Absolutely. Yeah. Seems like it'd be worth doing. But as I said, Meta is having trouble getting up off the ground. And why? Because they are building a solution in search of a problem. It's not a market that currently exists. The market that currently exists for VR is gaming. And gaming is the primary way that most users engage with virtual environments. And as a matter of fact, what they are actually trying to achieve is not specifically gaming. They want a virtual space, a place where people can congregate and design and so on. Apparently, Mark doesn't realize, well, I guess Mark missed the Ugandan Knuckles meme because it's been around. It's already out there. There's lots of really popular VR chat services. I don't recommend using any of them, but there's lots of them out there. That's not even a major draw for existing technologies and existing users that already have VR headsets, already have everything else they would otherwise need in order to participate in these places. Even gaming on a low level, there is one, it's an edge case, but there is one important area that has been neglected, which is not virtual meeting spaces or hybrid work environments. Although, as I said, those are all great ideas. We should be striving for them. We're just kind of doing it ass backwards here with Meta. But it's in-person game, tabletop game, being able to play board games with people far away. I mean, when you look at the popularity of such meeting spaces, while like VR chat and all of those tend to be pretty well, I mean, there's almost always a crowd in there, sure, depending on where you end up. But virtual tabletops like, well, Roll20, Fantasy Grounds, that's the one I'm thinking of and stuff like that, where you can play Cards Against Humanity with your friends, or D&D, or Monopoly, or any of that kind of stuff. That's one area that is a potential growth, a potential wedge area. And the reason why it's going to have to be a foot in the door with games is because games are something where you have a built-in user base. They generally have some disposable income. They're willing to spend it on games, but they also tend to be very, not necessarily brand loyal, but it's a finicky base. But it's one with lots of money. They're willing to spend it on tech. Sometimes they're willing to take a chance. They're marketable and so on. Video games is a huge industry. I had to actually look it up to see what it is now because I had a feeling that the COVID lockdowns probably gave a boost to video games, and it absolutely did. It's at 180 billion now. Prior to COVID, it was 120 billion. So that's a huge increase for a single industry over just 2 years. It's not the most popular, or I should say not the most, in terms of gross dollars, movies, we tend to compare. All right, let me put it this way. If we had a game and a movie that were both hotly anticipated and they were released on the same weekend, we generally, in terms of examining market forces, like to look at that opening weekend dollar. Movies outperform video games every single time, right? We have several movies at this point that are in the billions of dollars their opening weekend. But the thing with a movie is you watch it once, twice, maybe half a dozen times over the course of your entire life. Whereas games are a huge time investment and they stick around. Some of the most profitable games in terms of gross dollars, well, we'll get there. We'll get there. Oh, we are there, never mind. Here, I'll grab these links here, I'll show you. Bye, Mark. All right, highest grossing films. Avatar reclaimed #1, by the way, if you're into watching these kinds of things. But worldwide gross, and this is as of their release, which is why Avatar reclaimed the top spot here, because it continued to make sales just as Endgame has since it was overtaken. So almost $3 billion since 2009. Endgame, almost $3 billion since 2019. Titanic, $2 billion since '97. But if we look at the highest grossing games, God damn it, get out of here. Pac-Man, released in 1980, Space Invaders. And the gross US with adjustment for inflation, that's a lot more than $3 billion. Because they continue to make money. So in terms of like opening weekend success, movies, but they sell a lot of tickets. People go in, they sit in the seats and they watch them. They buy the DVDs and so on. But that is money that slows over time. Whereas the marketability of video games persists, partly due to, number one, just the nature of games as being interactive entertainment. Pac-Man is 40 years old now, and it's still, at its core, the same kind of fun in 1980 as it is today. So you get new people introduced to it, so on and so forth. So it isn't even close in terms of the longevity and profitability of games. Now, part of understanding what makes the game so compelling and what the future cyber-sociological implications are of virtual worlds, you kind of have to take a second to actually think about the nature of games as the industry and so on. Because if you followed what Mark was saying before, he was talking about at one point a future where essentially all of your media could potentially be consumed in a virtual environment. He said anything that can be displayed on a screen can be displayed on a hologram. He said it as easy as lion, but obviously there's a lot more to it than that. But essentially what he's talking about is that someday media could be transferable into between physical and virtual mediums, but of course leaving out the fact that almost all digital assets these days are already virtual. And the Horizon Worlds feature he was talking about is already something that's available. There's about 38 active users on one of them right now. And the whole thing is basically a crypto scam, right? So virtual assets do already have value. And moving to virtual environments means that you have virtual property, that means virtual contracts, and that means, well, all kinds of complicated legal stuff that Mark just kind of glossed over. And the way we got to where we are right now, where we're even discussing the possibility of physically buying a hat from GameStop and then using a code that allows your character in games to wear that hat and then transfer that hat to other games and so on, we are talking about NFTs, although not necessarily in a crypto sense, but we are talking about virtual digital items. And that's not in and of itself, games sales aside, that market is not in and of itself at all inconsequential. And it's already been the subject of scrutiny from the law. There are many dozens of civil cases that have arose thus far out of those digital assets. So the question is what is compelling about virtual worlds or interactive worlds to begin with? What would make somebody want to even participate in something like that? And I suppose more importantly, why are people gladly participating in some virtual worlds, but not Mark Zuckerberg's virtual world? And the answer to that, we have to go back a little bit into history here to talk about where games originally came from, because Pac-Man's a fairly simple game. Space Invaders, many of those up there, early games were of course very simple because they were limited by the technology of their time. But as that became less of a concern, games in general were able to take root as a true art form. Not all games are art, some of them just plain suck. But I mean, I guess in a technical sense, not even bad art is still art, but in the same way that a Michael Bay film and and some other films would be considered art in the same category. But I'm not going to define art just yet, because we are going to talk about digital art and art later on in this unit, so we'll come back to it. But basically, at this point, the broad strokes are is that as technology evolved, we were able to actually build more complex games, and complexity not in terms necessarily of graphics, because there are plenty of games today that have pretty crappy pixel art graphics that are still art and still very compelling. It's more about the capability of being able to tell a story. So games are now art, not all of them, but then again, neither are all movies, and neither are all books, neither are all paintings, right? Some of them are just, well, non-art objects, I guess. But also, in some cases, that's exactly the point that the artist is trying to make. Andy Warhol became a very famous artist by specifically creating non-art objects, to the point where everyone looked at them and said, wow, that's a non-art object, how very artistic it is. So it is what it is. So what it comes down to is, as technology evolved here for games, we're able to offer more interactivity, more customizability, more immersion, and so on. And as it turns out, these factors, and this is not just me saying this, according to sociological studies and psychological studies on games and gameplay, those are the factors that we consider to be the most important. Because we all play games for different reasons. Sometimes there's an intrinsic motivation, the challenge, the skill investment, entertainment, the exploration. That's a big one in open worlds these days. Sometimes for wish identification or wishful identification, we want to get deeply in touch with our id or super ego and have ourselves some good old-fashioned escapism, or fulfill our real life desires in a safer environment, so on. Sometimes we play games because we want a sense of competence. We want to feel successful, feel like we're growing and progressing. Sometimes that's really difficult to do in real life, but it's pretty easy to do, either by participating in or manipulating the game rules in a set environment. We like autonomy. We want to feel independent. We don't want to feel like we're being controlled, which is, I mean, the paradox, we can call it, I'm just going to make this up right now, let's call it the Far Cry paradox, where you're given a vast open world to develop a character, but then like 7 goddamn times in the game, Vas jumps up, punches you in the face, and you enter a cutscene, you can't do anything. I just checked that corner, man, where'd you come from? So sometimes autonomy is taken from us in games, and that kind of sucks, but that feeling of independence and autonomy, we can't always get that quite so easily in real life, and games can provide that. And then also a sense of relatedness, because if we play a game and other people play that game, it gives us a connection to other people. MMOs are meant to do that, although sometimes it drives people apart more than anything. But we want to feel like we're making a contribution. That is the goal of MMOs, is to join up into a guild and do the high-level raids and all that kind of stuff that we couldn't possibly do on our own. So all of this leads to a psychological phenomenon known as the Proteus Effect. And if you would like to, by the way, read the studies yourself, from which I draw these conclusions, I'm going to have to sign back in because now I'm in England. Down here in this unit, I forgot to publish the slides. Let me fix that. We have Yi Proteus effect here. And then later on, when we start talking about virtual physical assault, there's another study down here later. For your own edification, I'm not going to read them to you. In a nutshell, the Proteus effect is a name for the phenomenon of what happens when a person's behavior is influenced by the appearance and actions of virtual avatars, which when I first began hearing about this, my first reaction was, no way. But as it turns out, the evidence is fairly compelling in this regard. There have been multiple studies that have been conducted on this effect. I had long suspected something similar. Playing games myself, I never really found myself particularly compelled. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the game, but there's a game a while ago called Fable. It was one of the first games that I can recall way back when that offered branching stories dependent upon character choices. And indeed, your character avatar itself would change depending upon the choices that you made. So if you made evil choices, you'd grow horns and you'd have like an aura of fire about you, and you'd get scars and end up looking like a crazy demon by the end. If you made good choices, you'd get a halo and wings and so on. And the characters in the game, the NPCs, would address you in different ways depending on those actions and so on as well. This is one of the first games I can recall with something like that, although I think White and Black may have done it first. But in any event, it was one of the first ones that I can recall. But I remember as a kid playing that, and my friends and I discussing the game, and they'd be talking about how their characters had grown horns and stuff like that, and I didn't even know at all. It's like, what are you talking about? What did you have to do in order to do that kind of thing? Because I wasn't aware that there was even a branching storyline or anything in the game. And it was at that point that I realized that they were making some very different choices than I was. And it's always been, just anecdotally, personally, my own experience, that I don't ever really feel compelled unless I'm playing a game and I want to experience all branching paths to make immoral choices in games. It's just not something that I really even care about or think to do. Other people obviously do. But when I heard about the Proteus Effect, I thought back to those times, those early games that I played, and it occurred to me that that perhaps this is not because I myself am a paragon of virtue, because while I may act that way in video games, I certainly don't play that in real life. But perhaps the reason for my continuing down a path of good moral choices is because often games will force you into good moral choices, at least at the very beginning. And maybe it is a snowball effect. For example, the Proteus effect on me is that my character is already making moral choices, and therefore I, as the player, want to continue to make moral choices, and so on. Alternatively, the Proteus effect in reverse also works the other way as well. When an avatar is already presented as good, we behave better. When we present an avatar in a scenario where they are good, then we tend to make more moral choices with that character. So it's the interaction, the changing of behaviors between the avatar and the player back and forth in both directions. So essentially, we infer others' appearance, we infer by other people's appearance and behavior their personality, right? If someone's walking around and they got an angry look on their face and they're stomping up and down the hallway, then I might make the assumption based upon how they appear and their behavior that they are in a bad mood. And if they continue to do it, I might surmise that they might be just a frustrated, angry, annoyed person in general, which is normal and natural. And we do that kind of stuff subconsciously. We're social creatures. We don't have to announce to every single person around us how we're feeling all the time. That's just not how it works. But it might surprise you that what the Proteus Effect studies have shown is that not only do we not automatically know how other people feel, we don't even automatically know how we feel all the time. And so a change in our appearance or behavior can lead to us making an inference about ourselves. So essentially, that whole, smile or laugh your way through. If you're depressed, just laugh or smile or something like that. If you're feeling down, that stupid advice that people always give you. Well, there's something to it. I mean, it's not going to completely change everything. It's not going to change your life. It's not going to change the way that you're thinking. But if we do make adjustments in our appearance or behavior, it does change how we perceive ourselves. This is actually comes from earlier psychological studies prior to the Proteus Effect and prior to even the concept of digital avatars, called self-perception theory, all the way from the 1960s, which was pioneered by physicist turned psychologist Daryl Bem. The theory, as his studies revealed, is essentially, if I can recall the details of this study, right, it was the Penn test. So these early tests, they had two groups of subjects, other than the controls, of course, and they handed each member of the group a Bic pen. The control group was told to just hold on to it and use it to take notes and so on. The two test groups, one of them was told to hold the pen between their lips in a way that without their conscious knowledge of this would force it to seem as if they were smiling, like they're holding it with their teeth. The other ones were told to hold it with their lips, so they appeared to be frowning. And then they just ran them through a series of various different psychological tests, the exact details of which escape me. But ultimately, what they found out is that those who were forced, in essence, to smile had worse attitudes than those who were forced, in a sense, to smile. Did I get that wrong? Frown, smile? You know what I mean. But self-perception theory, in this case by them, in that case and several other corroborating studies showed that if we're not in any particular mood, we're in a sort of neutral state, taken, of course, in aggregate, an individual in those studies might have been in a bad mood, but taken in aggregate, fairly neutral disposition, that just the act of frowning or smiling, even if it wasn't one that was a farce, but brought on by simply holding a pen a certain way in the mouth, that it did affect the behavior of those in the study. So how do virtual avatars then affect our behavior, or can they? Well, that's what the Proteus effect comes in. That's where self-perception moves to the digital world. So in one study on whether or not similar feats could be accomplished with digital avatars rather than holding a pen in their mouths, they were essentially, they as in a test group, was given access to virtual avatars. This was non-VR. If I remember correctly, this was just a game, but it was a first-person game, and they could not see themselves. So the test group was put into this virtual environment. There was a confederate of the experimenter already within another person in the game for the subject to interact with. That person was instructed to follow a simple script just to get the conversation going, just saying, tell me a little bit about yourself. But prior to interacting with the subject, prior to interacting with the experimenter, the subject was first asked to go to a virtual mirror and inspect their avatar. And what they found out is that, is it on the next slide? Yeah. What they found out is that people tended to conform to the expectations of their appearance. So subjects with an avatar that were attractive tended to be friendlier and interact and even flirty with the experimenter. Those who were tall tended to be more confident and so on. Those who had, well, in the study, they used the term ugly avatar. I guess we'll just use the same term. They tended to be more reticent, more shy, and so on. So the way we perceive ourselves, even virtually, can affect our behavior. But it should also be noted that one of the things that Yi, in this case, noticed in this study is that the behavior did change based upon the avatar, but the behavior identified with the avatar was still something that was already in the subject's mind. So why would somebody who's taller be more confident? Well, because the subject already associated that trait with people who are taller. Why would people who are more attractive be more flirty and open? Because the subject already had that preconceived notion about people who are attractive. So they did bring that baggage in with them. But what that also tells us is that a subject's association with certain traits in an avatar made a really big difference in how they perceived themselves. So self-representation, essentially, with an avatar is a very personal thing, but also one that's very important to the interactivity of the environment. So another aspect of the Proteus effect is that when we have an avatar in a game or in any virtual environment, whether it be meta or elsewhere, and notice how meta, while Mark was talking about not wanting to associate your personal social media accounts with your work accounts, the robot aside, Facebook Meta in general has taken a rather direct and hard stance against pseudonyms or pseudo identities, right? Facebook doesn't want you to create multiple accounts. They will ban your accounts. I know because I've had multiple accounts banned from Facebook, sometimes for that reason. But they really don't like that. And if your account is banned, how do you get it back? Contact Facebook. You have to show them a copy of your ID with your photo on it to prove that you are who you say you are. So unless you've got a Wisconsin state issued ID that says Dick Hertz or something on it, I can't get my account. I mean, you can't get your account back. They don't want you to associate with a fictional identity, right? So while they're making a lot of effort to make the avatars in the metaverse as diverse as possible, and they showed somebody in a robot form in one case, you can bet that that their preference will almost certainly be that your avatar in the metaverse, or at least your base avatar, maybe not one that you can change for individual worlds, but your base avatar will be as close as possible to a digital representation of your physical self more than anything else. And that's fine, but that's also a strike against them, because the Proteus effect shows us that being able to customize, to not have an avatar that is exactly like us, but an idealized version of ourselves is really what we want. That's what's most compelling to immersion. So that's why games with customization tend to be the ones that have and sustain a player base longer. You've played, everyone here I'm sure has played games, but if you play a lot of games, then consider all of the games that you have that don't offer customization, that maybe you enjoy playing, but how often do you play those compared to any game where you can get your own skins? I mean, even Red Dead, that game have a fairly limited amount of customization. There's two main characters in the game that you can control, and you can change some things about them, but you can't make them completely how you want them. I mean, you can in online, but let's pretend online doesn't exist. Rockstar does. Anyway, I know, right? Real cutting edge, scathing humor. Anyway, so yeah, we like customization, not because it makes it a more immersive, interactive experience. It's very important for the longevity of virtual environments. We also, as the studies show, tend to learn more from people or media that we identify with. And if there is such a thing as an educational game, it would obviously benefit greatly from being able to create an avatar that we can interact with or have a more immersive experience. It only aids in the learning process, the identification process. And this is true even of purely interactive games, right? There was another study here later on by Yi. No, this one wasn't Yi. I don't know, I'd have to look it up. I can't recall. No, this one was Yi. We Fit, right? There's been several games out there that were meant and designed specifically to allow for interactivity and exercise, to level up in real life, I think was the slogan when We Fit first came out or something like that. But in any event, a lot of them fail at really what their main attempt is to do. But We Fit seems to persist, and it seemed to be the most popular of the bunch. And the reason for that is because not the game itself or any of the accessories, it wasn't doing anything particularly novel. I mean, shit, it's not even doing anything you can't do on your own. It's basically replicating aerobic exercise videos that have been around since the 80s. That's all it's really doing. The reason that it persists is because not the game itself, but the actual console allows you to create an avatar. And you can design that avatar, and you can bring that avatar into the game, to any game, as a matter of fact. And so in interactive exercise games where users were allowed to create an avatar, they found that if they were able to create an idealized avatar, so what they wanted their future selves to look like, it was more motivating than ones that already had an accurate reflection, perhaps, of some weight issues or something like that. So it was the idealized part of it that really, really mattered in the end. And interestingly enough, I don't mention this a lot on other slides here, but interestingly enough, those who were allowed to have idealized avatars, it worked best when, number one, the idealized avatar changed with the progress of the actual person. So if a person was already overweight or obese when they began playing the game, the more weight they lost, the more their avatar changed in response. When they did that, not only would players play longer and work out more, but they would continue to do that even when they weren't playing the game. They would go to the gym more afterwards. So it had a more long-lasting effect. Now, this is not lost on the industry. The fact that people love to customize things, customize their avatars, that's not lost on them, which is why most of the transactions that you see associated with games, even games that are otherwise free, are raking in tons and tons of money because they're aware of this. They're aware of the Proteus effect and how being able to customize your avatar can be a huge cash cow, right? Just look at Fork Knife here. Almost all the money, all the money they make from users is going to be on cosmetic items. And the average player for a free game spends $100 a year, give or take, on those items. That's a lot. The science on this is pretty subtle. And there's a quote from Nick Yee himself in the study. Studies have shown that in general, people create slightly idealized avatars based on their actual selves. But a compensation effect has been observed. People with a higher body mass index, likely overweight or obese, create more physically idealized avatars, which are taller or thinner. People who are depressed or have low self-esteem create avatars with more idealized traits, and so on and so forth. As we just talked about earlier this week, personality leads to deliberate choices, and those deliberate choices can be analyzed. In the case of avatars, it's the things that we find ourselves lacking, our most personal insecurities. Now, there are also some games that are almost entirely based on being able to customize your avatar. This is Roblox. My daughter and I like to play together. As you can see, mine over here doesn't change very often. I don't spend a lot of time customizing my Roblox avatar. My daughter, on the other hand, spends, and it's probably wrong of me to use my own daughter as a subject, but she likes to play the game, and I like to observe her playing the game. And what I've noticed is that she spends about half the time playing the game, not playing the game. She spends almost all of her time creating new avatars and outfits and putting all these pieces together. She's 11, so she's obsessed with being as tall as she can possibly make herself. And so we found ourselves a giraffe neck that makes her definitely the tallest most servers we visit. But even games like this, which again is free most of the time, or at least mostly free, where does their money come from? Part of it is from experiences, paying for access to certain games, but almost all of it is on cosmetic items. I can tell you she spends just about every penny of her allowance on Robux, be able to buy new clothing items and emotes and whatnot. And Roblox recently went public. Right? They were a private company. They had their IPO and it was released. And their profitability has been posted ever since, of course. And you can see that they're making money hand over fist. I mean, Roblox is 18, is it 18,000? They call them experiences, but they're, is everyone here familiar with Roblox? Yeah, give or take. So the premise of Roblox is that you can create games and they will host them. So in the beginning, it was a lot of like kids and stuff, just kind of making really simple games. But of course now there's a lot of people really monetizing it, and they have dev teams that handle experiences and so on. So the actual infrastructure is handled by Roblox. The actual content is from content creators who are monetizing experiences. And then the player base is mostly under 16 who are, you know, hopping from game to game. A couple of them are more popular than others. Right now, one of the most popular is on the right-hand side here, a game called Doors, which is a horror running from monsters game. But there's other ones like first-person shooters and what are basically like virtual doll houses and stuff like that. So the experiences are vast. There's a huge difference between the different experiences. And almost all of those are free. in order to monetize an experience, usually what the creators will do is maybe create in-game items or something like that that costs virtual currency called Robux, and Robux cost real dollars, and that's how Roblox monetizes the entire process. They take 30% off the top of everything that a content creator gets from monetizing their experience. But in addition to creating those experiences, other players can create cosmetic items and put them up for sale, which are also for sale for Robux. And Roblox gets 30% of those as well. So this is essentially what Roblox has been making, which is only 30% of the total revenue that the game generates. It's a huge amount of money, huge. And the Proteus Effect and its ability to counter-influence us not only incentivizes us to buy cosmetic items, it can also theoretically be used, and I say theoretically in quotes because it's definitely being done and it's definitely happened to you, but can also be used to influence us in a marketing way as well. So in another study, and this one is different from Yi, they ran a test to see if they could manipulate users in a virtual environment by essentially having their avatar market to the player. So they would display their avatar holding up either the fictional, well, either of the fictional drinks here. And they found that there is kind of a feedback effect here, whereby the avatar being controlled by the player can control the player if the avatar is presented with one of these drinks. So this study showed rather, that players were more likely to go after Nanako or Torino, or Tornio, sorry, based upon what their avatar advertised to them. So manipulation is right. What else drives immersion though, other than having a customizable avatar? And I guess before we get off the subject, since we were just talking about marketing and manipulation, again, these virtual items are without a doubt going to be huge. And when I say going to be huge, I don't mean in some far off day and era. I mean, this is like a 5-year thing. Within 5 years, virtual items are going to be bought, sold, traded, and moved from game to game. There's already markets in place for it. Steam already has a marketplace for trading cards and in-game items and stuff like that. As soon as there is some kind of a mechanism and a probable market for more widespread trading, there's absolutely no reason why they wouldn't want to do that, right? So it's happening. What else drives immersion in addition to having a customizable avatar? Virtual exploration. That's a huge one for a lot of people. Open world games are all the rage. Not all of them. There's a lot of still very popular closed world games, but the ones that tend to, I mean, one of the most popular MMOs these days is GTA 5, still, right? And why? Because it's a giant open world playground. You can do whatever you want, more or less, within reason. Sometimes outside of reason. But yeah, the exploration, taking advantage of the digital immersive environments to do things otherwise impossible or difficult. It's one of the things that drives immersion, that gets people playing and keeps them playing. Turns out that a lot of people are really interested in the social navigation aspect of it. A lot of people really like making friends, building friends, playing with friends, that kind of thing. I mean, that's why my daughter and I play. She's got plenty of friends, but they're just more fun to play with people, right? I wouldn't know anything about that, but that's what the studies show. Contextual adaptation, being able to see the game world, see it change and adjust according to the socio-cultural context, something that keeps it interesting. We're talking here partially about major updates and in-game world events and so on. But really what we're talking about here is Fallout 76. So when Fallout 76 was first released, it was the first Fallout-themed MMO. And Fallout, as a game franchise, huge moneymaker for Bethesda, lots of really loyal players. It seemed like a slam dunk, right? Definitely should have been. Everyone that I know who is a Fallout fan was really excited about it and wanted to join it right away. But it kind of fell flat. And why did it fall flat? Well, a lot of that blame is placed on the fact that it was kind of lazy, that Bethesda reused assets from Fallout 4, which was already like 5 years old at the time it was released or something like that. That they didn't really do anything new or anything like that. That it was a cash grab, and all of that. I mean, gamers love to complain, so there's tons of that blame being laid around. But even years after that, Fallout 76 is still around. And even after free weekends, the player base would jump up, but then it would level back off. Why is that? It's because the game had never developed any kind of underlying sociological subtext. There's no there's no contextual adaptation. There's no change. There's no evolving. There's no culture associated with it. And the ones that is there is honestly just not that exciting. If you don't play 76, you might not be aware of this, but it's actually one of the few cases of an MMO not becoming toxic. If you go into 76, you are more likely than not to find people who are more than happy to help you with quests, and give you items and shit like that. It's definitely not like Rust. Okay, it's just not. And that's great. I mean, you don't want to see toxic behaviors, but it's also not that exciting. It's just not that. You can make friends and stuff, but also the way that the game works on the back end, it's really difficult to stay in touch with those people as well. So it's a really welcoming environment, but you don't really build up that kind of stuff, because as we talked about before, when a game is created, the developers create the game, they put in all of this work, all of these assets, all of the programming, everything that goes into making the game, they create rules for the game, but once the game is released, it's the players that make the game. They're the ones who decide to play by the rules or not. They're the ones who decide what to do with it. They're the ones who decide to grow it. So without that, it's not really much of a game at all. And then last, as we were talking about, the identity representation, portraying either the actual or ideal self. And most of us choose a version of our actual selves, although an idealized version. All right, we're at 10 after. We will pick this up next week. Enjoy your weekend. Take care.